Listeners, this is All India Radio MOKOKCHUNG at 100.9 megahertz on FM band. And on board the program, Police and the Citizens Empowering in Unison for a telephonic discussion. Today we have Shri Rupin Sharma, IPS, Director General, Border Affairs, Nagaland Police. Sir, I hope you're doing good today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm doing well.
All right, sir.
You have both MBA and LLB degree, but yet you became an IPS officer. Was it by choice or out of compulsion?
No, there was no compulsion. When I was in college and I used to consult one of my lecturers for some sessions in zoology, and I saw some books on civil services lying in his room. I just asked him, I said, what are these for? He said, this is for civil services. Despite my father being a civil servant, I had no idea what an IAS or a civil service is, like most kids. So when I asked him, he said it's very difficult. But when I looked at the books, I found that I could answer a lot of questions. And I said, sir, I can answer these questions. So he said, you must be joking. It is a very difficult job. People have been appearing for 4-5 attempts and not been able to do it. Mm-hmm. So after I completed my MBA, that sort of became a challenge for me. So I tried and I got through into the civil services.
Thank you so much for letting us know that. Now, join with me here is Mr. Sinti Walling, and he will also be a part of this discussion. So, Sinti, do you have anything on mind to query our DG, sir?
Yeah, sir. How was it like then when you first landed up in Nagaland?
I'm virtually a thoroughbred Himachali, so there was not too much common between the two places. I had hardly ever ventured out of Himachal except for the basic training in Hyderabad. So firstly, when you come to know that you got Nagaland as a card, it was a shock and you have to look at it in the map. Fortunately for me, that was not a problem because I had been very good in general studies throughout my college and university. Let me be honest, being so away from your home, nobody would be probably happy getting a card like that. So I landed up after a bit of struggles in court. Once I landed up, I found Nagaland was very different. One of my first experiences was that I thought everybody is so healthy that everybody has red cheeks and red lips. It was only in the next 5 days I had found out that it is because of Tamil and not because of health. Moving around, it was very different and difficult because Himachal Pradesh, which is one of the best governed states in the country, law and order is not an issue. Here, about 3 years ago, I was in my hometown, which is Dharamsala, and my mother was mentioning about that chief engineer is very corrupt. She says he's taken a bribe of 50,000 rupees. So this is 2017 that she says that the chief engineer has taken a bribe of 50,000 rupees. And I was scratching my head and looking at, Himachal is still so honest that 50,000 is a big bribe. Things are different. I'm from a place which is relatively better managed, better governed, more honest, more educated people, more law-abiding people. Whereas Nagaland, it has been in a phase of transition for the past 75 years since independence. There are problems because of that. People have not known the arm of law, not only the law as such, but the arms of law, how they function. So it is difficult. It is very different from the rest of the country. Things are catching up, but there are issues in the society. I'm not saying issues in the sense there is negative, but every society takes time to develop. So Nagas as a society will take time to develop and adjust to the modern ways of governance. So yes, things are different. It has been a difficult journey.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the experiences for people to listen. Now, sir, you have been here for about nearly 3 decades.
Almost 2.5 decades.
Yeah, 2.5 decades to be precise. And I feel that you are one right person to be observing as well as commenting on what has changed over this 2.5 decades. So what are the experiences, if you'd like to share?
Firstly, that certain amount of development has taken place. Infrastructure development and all certain developments have taken place, which is not necessarily powered by the government. A lot of development which takes place in any society is also because it is powered naturally by what is happening in the environment around us. For example, the telecom sector or the packaged goods or the mobiles. So whether without the government this will happen. But I think a lot of things have happened without even an interface of the government in Nagaland. But yes, the state government and the government machinery has done an admirable job. Infrastructure has developed a bit. So there is a lot to be desired still. People have become more educated. There is a larger number of people whom you can interact and talk with in Nagaland. There is probably a greater degree of acceptability of mainlanders in Nagaland. Besides the violence, which has come down, I personally feel there is not too much change in the law and order scenario from what existed in, say, 95. Yes, the levels of violence have come down. The amount of clashes between the security forces and the insurgents have come down because of the ceasefire and all. But otherwise, law and order probably remains the same. The policing functions and the criminal justice system functions in Nagaland have not become established. It's sort of sad why this has not happened. There are various factors. One is society in transition, which is the biggest factor because people would still want to go to their own village communities or the NGOs or those organizations to sort out disputes, which should otherwise come to the police or the judiciary. Then the other factor is the existence of underground groups who do wield some degree of influence. The formal criminal justice system, as in policing and the judiciary, is time consuming. Although it is the correct method, but if people want quick justice, people are tempted to go towards underground organizations for quick dispensation of justice. But we must realize that even though that justice is dispensed, it is not on equal terms. It is through the barrel of the gun, if you would say. It is through a threat and coercion rather than through a willing compliance to the authorities. In the health and infrastructure sector, I would not say things have not improved, but things are still far behind what could have been achieved. Remoteness is a factor, but I think our delivery mechanisms leave a lot to be desired. The over-tolerant attitude of Nagas, that chalta hai attitude, that if something has gone wrong, even if it is deliberate, we will tolerate it and maaf kore dibo. Hoye to na? So that has impacted the development adversely. Over-tolerant attitude with law and order issues and criminal issues being addressed at the community level rather than in a legal manner has also impacted the pace of development in the society, because that fear of law is not there. The fear is of someone pointing out a finger and then you reconciling and making friends or bargaining with him and settling issues, rather than the fear of punishment if you do something wrong. So things have been changing, but things have been changing very slowly. There is a substantial number of people who are educated now who have been raising issues like corruption and whatever, backdoor appointments. And earlier, say when I came, most of these issues were not raised. I think factors like social media have also made an impact, because now people get the same information is shared within no time to almost all segments of society. So things have changed. I think the pace at which things will change will become faster and faster in the coming days because of the technological factors and also the literacy. I think another big contributory factor for change could be the youngsters of Nagaland who have been educated outside Nagaland. They see better systems in the rest of the country. They want to come back and discuss and implement those things. So they will bring about a greater change, a greater chance of discussion on various issues. So things will change. I'm very hopeful that things will change, although it will take some time, but things will change.
Thank you for your hope. Also, thank you so much for being outrageously bold and honest in giving your opinion.
So, like as discussed earlier, Nagaland has to change. And compared to other states, Nagaland is still lagging behind.
Yes.
So definitely change will take place. Change is coming, but what should the society's first step be in order to bring changes in Nagaland?
There are certain things which can be changed through the intervention of the government and the society. Certain things which will change on their own. Certain things which will have a mix of both, but with some degree of government intervention, they could be made to go in a certain direction, in a desirable direction. For example, the transition of Nagas from a traditionally village-oriented, tribal-oriented society to a modern, codified law-abiding society, it is desirable. Now, there is hardly any effort being made in that direction. There is more effort towards reconciliation of various disputes and matters. Even government and governance issues, things are decided informally between parties. Now, when things are decided informally between parties, it weakens the formal system of governance because the government is not in the thick of things. So I think that the government systems need to become more vibrant. They need to become more assertive. I am not saying that the NGOs and the unions do not have a role, but I think the primary role is of the government. Example, this clash happened in the Kivungan area. These are instances which happen very frequently in Nagaland. Inter-village clashes, inter-tribal clashes. I'm not saying very frequently, but yes, they do happen. And we leave it up to the villages to sort it out. We leave it up to the communities to sort it out. Yes, the government does intervene, but the government intervenes when we are sort of neck deep in water. I think if the government machinery, for example, can intervene in the lull period, we all know that all these clashes normally start, say, November to February, they last, most of them. But this period of, say, March to October is the period when they could be sorted out. And I'm not saying this with a view to criticize anyone. So I think this is where we leave things too much to the communities. Yes, the communities have a role to play, but the government machinery has a role to play. I would probably be surprised if most of the SPs and the DCs, again, I'm not criticizing an individual, I'm just saying how the system would function in another place. In all other parts of the country, probably the SPs and the DCs would make a list of potential flashpoints in their areas, whether it is on the basis of tribe or village clashes or even between two families or individuals. It can very well be possible that there are two families who are not at good terms and they will fight. So they'll make a list of all those flashpoints and they will try to address all those flashpoints well in time. Ours is more of a reactive measure. We react when things start going out of hand. We don't engage with people. Now, I'm not saying individuals don't engage with people. Yes, officers do engage, but the officers and these people who do engage, they don't leave it for their successors, so that it's sort of the handing over of the baton in a relay race. It's not that Nagaland has not been doing well. Nagaland has been doing well within its constraints, but there are better governed systems, better systems in place in the rest of the country, where dispute resolution is done through the intervention of the government machinery. I think we need to look at those models, adapt these models to Nagaland and become more assertive. And in today's world, when the government has so much to offer for the villages and the communities and the individuals, whether it is by way of development projects or Manrega schemes or jobs or contracts, I think government does wield a lot of influence, where government can influence the outcome of various decisions and disputes in the villages or in the countryside.
Many people are of the opinion that the law and order situation in Nagaland will be better off once the Naga issues are solved. So how do you take on this?
There are certain things which get impacted by the insurgency or by the flux in the situation directly. A lot of other things don't get affected by insurgency. What I can broadly list out what gets directly affected by insurgency in Nagaland. Firstly, the extortion by undergrounds. If there is an accord, that there is a likelihood of that coming down. I am not saying that will come down. I'm just saying likelihood of that coming down. Then the use and abuse of weapons and arms to threaten people, whether to settle individual disputes or conflicts or for extortion, that will come down. Then possibility of arms being trafficked and sold will come down. These are the things which will probably directly change if an accord takes place. Besides that, an accord could have trickle down effect on certain other things, which could be corruption. I know for sure, and I have heard a lot of people saying that if there is an accord, the amount of corruption will get controlled, because now there is a widespread opinion that some amount of corrupt money also lands up in the hands of the underground. Even if it does not land in the hands of the undergrounds, this oft repeated alibi by certain people that they have to indulge in corrupt practices because of threats and pressures from undergrounds. So if there is an accord and there is a peaceful solution, hopefully that amount of corruption may come down, especially if there is a direct involvement of undergrounds there. However, if that is just an excuse by the not so honest people to put the blame on undergrounds, then I don't think there will be a change in the patterns of corruption or the levels of corruption post an accord. Post an accord, if the police is able to assert itself, the trust of public in police is likely to go up and the police may get more reports of crime. That can happen. But personally, I feel that that trust has to be earned by the police. It will not come just by signing an accord. Police will have to take proactive steps to win back the trust of the people as the sole guardians of law and order in the society. Post an accord, there could also be dissatisfaction among certain elements who are currently associated with various political groups who may not find rehabilitation in the manner in which they think they should be getting. So that could be a reason for discord. I think besides this, another issue which impacts law and order and development in the society is the proliferation of NGOs in the society in Nagaland, not underground related, but various society groups. A lot of social media activists have written against them. From the development perspective and from the perspective of creating holes in the pockets of ordinary civilian and ordinary man, those NGOs and societies and associations are an equal culprit, if not a bigger culprit than the extortion or the taxation by the undergrounds. Because I presume that an ordinary man in Nagaland has to pay membership fees forcibly to many organizations
Right, sir.
in the society. Yeah, so that is something which has to be tackled with or without an accord. The society will become more and more free of threat and coercion. That is the hope. But with or without that accord coming, I think there is no substitute to better law and order. I think, as I said, that police has to understand that it is the sole guardian of safety and security of individuals in the society. And police in Nagaland should take pride in this duty. And I think we should probably try to assert ourselves much more. Because if we sort of get into the habit of not doing it, then it will take us a long time to start doing it again when it is required. I'm not saying that it has not been doing it, but I think Nagaland Police is also an institution which has to start thinking of more proactiveness in policing matters. I mean, in any case, improvement is required in all forms of activity, not just policing.
So during our discussion, I just felt that you've been a little skeptical regarding the role of police here in Nagaland. And with those kind of skepticism, do you feel that a post-accord scenario here in Nagaland will be peaceful?
I am not skeptical about the role of the police, and I don't even underestimate the role of what Nagaland police has been doing. And it is not any commentary on any individual or the government or anyone. No. It is the stage of development of policing in Nagaland which is behind schedule. It is that stage of development of policing in Nagaland which is about, say, 20 years behind schedule as compared to the rest of the country. There are systems in policing in Nagaland which need to be improved. We have to learn from other states and make a better system. In Nagaland, whenever there is any big instance which takes place, there is this tendency to form an SIT. I have myself headed 2-3 SITs in the past. But most of these SITs have been found wanting in the final results. The reason for that is that the SITs are made by picking people from various districts or officers from various places. It is not a composite, comprehensive unit which functions 24/7. Now, for example, in other states, the state CIDs is not intelligence. CID is criminal investigation department. It is a state level unit, sometimes headed by a DG or an ADG in most of the states. It has a formal system of an IG or a DIG and 3-4 SPs and DYSPs and inspectors. It is a full-fledged unit which functions 24/7. Any important case happening in the entire state, the first option is not an SIT but to give it to the state CID because it is a fully functional body. For example, in Nagaland, yes, there is a DIG CID, there is an IG crime and a DIG CID, but below them there are just a handful of officers. So those handful of officers, we cannot expect them to deliver results on their own. The staffing and manpower is not adequate there. So we know systems in other states where what is a CID and what is its role and how it should function. But those systems have not been brought to Nagaland and made functional the manner in which they should be. So I am not skeptical about the individual capabilities of officers. Given an opportunity, they would probably do a very good job. But Sometimes an individual will only be as good as the system into which he is put. So we need to invest in developing individuals and officers by training and retraining and giving them exposure, sending them abroad, outside Nagaland or whatever. There is also a requirement to strengthen the systems. Without a system, without a backup for an individual, you cannot do anything. We cannot do anything. It is not about me, it is about everybody. So I am not skeptical about the Nagaland police. No, there are systems, there are institutions in Nagaland police which need to be created, equipped, and strengthened. Honestly, I'll give you an example. Again, no comment on an individual, but we have the post of the SP border. There is very little defined role for the SP border. There is very little mechanism for the SP border. There is very little reporting mechanism which is defined for the SP border. I'm not saying anything against the individual, or I'm not even commenting on the government policy. What I'm just saying is, when we create a post, we need to strengthen the mechanism which will help it to function. Without a supporting mechanism, an institution to make an officer or institution function, it will not help. So we need to learn from better systems which exist in other states and do things. Another example I'll give you is, like, many years ago, this was I think 18-20 years ago, when there was an emphasis on human rights, when human rights first were brought into the focus in the country. The MHA and the government of India recommended that because of custodial deaths, there should be a post of DIG or a IG human rights and social justice. Now, Nagaland also, we did create a post of human rights and social justice. The gentleman, whoever gets posted there, has no work. So rather than having a post where there is no work, see, we will have 100 people, out of which, say, some will have work, some will not have work. But if the 100 posts, and they can be clubbed where everybody gets some work to do, then the systems become stronger. So I'm not skeptical about the quality of Nagaland police. Our boys are the best. And again, I'm not flattering anyone. I have worked with all of them. They are the best. They need to have systems which support them, which need to have systems which encourage them to work. We need to have systems where they have targets to achieve. We need to have systems where their performance can be measured. And similarly, the systems of rewards and punishment, if they do something good or they are not able to achieve certain things. These are things which we need to focus on rather than pointing out fingers. I don't want to point out fingers. It's like improvement of systems. There are systems, there are things on paper. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Wheel is already there. We just have to make that wheel go around in circles for us to travel that distance.
Sir, as stated by you, the performance of Nagaland police, the duties performed by Nagaland police have been lauded by, like all the states of India. No matter where they go, they have been praised for their duties. Now, that aside, with the advent of technology, with the advancement, how prepared or what is the capacity of Nagaland police in investigating, and especially in the modern day crimes, sir?
See, there can be no one single parameter which can be used for knowing the qualities or capabilities of Nagaland police. But 2-3 different things on which you can try to assess Nagaland police is, one is in the work of prevention and detection of crime. I think our manpower capabilities as well as our infrastructure in prevention and detection of crime leaves a lot to be desired. Our detection of crimes is quite low. And please let me clarify that by detection, I am not saying detection of cases which are registered. I am saying detection of crimes which are not registered, which means first I detect a crime and then I register it. Let me make things clear. Like, if a person X is having a weapon .32 revolver at his home, and if I go and search for it based on my information, that is what I will call detection. But if there is a weapon which is found with a criminal, but the criminal is not found, but I know that he had it in his home and I search for that crime, that is investigation. That is slightly different. So detection is when he takes that initiative and finds out about a crime. Investigation is there is a crime which is registered and I try to find out who has committed it. Mm-hmm. So our capabilities in detection and prevention are low because our systems are not very good. Infrastructure for investigation of modern crimes like cyber crimes and all, it's just about okay. Say on a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is minimal to 100, it will be around 45, 50, which is not bad. for a
Right,
state
sir.
like Nagaland. Manpower capabilities in detection of sophisticated crimes, including IT crimes and all, would again be, say, on a scale of 0 to 100, would be around 30, which is not good, which needs a lot to be desired. Because, see, I'm saying 30 because a large chunk of the police force does not do that investigation job also. Number of people who can do it, and secondly, the capability of the people who can do it. So, both ways, it is like not very good. Then we'll come to investigation of crimes. There are certain crimes which we don't follow up on. For example, extortion by undergrounds or by civilians. Conspiracies and corruption is another area where we don't focus on. I think overall you can say around 35 to 40 on a scale of 100 should be good enough as of today for Nagaland police. So there is a lot of scope for improvement. I think that will happen with training and with exposure. Exposure is not only exposure outside the state, but also exposure by way of investigating more crimes. So as I said, that the crime figures for the past 20 years have not increased too much, despite the population having grown 2 times. If I'm investigating 100 cases today with 5 officers, my exposure will only be around 20 cases per officer. But if the number of cases registered is 200, then each of my officers investigates double the number of cases, hypothetically. So that exposure, that quantity of exposure and that quality of exposure will also help us in improving our skills. But since we are registering less number of cases, or lesser number of people are coming to us with their complaints, it is taking us more time to improve our skills.
So is it the trust issue or the ignorance of the people?
It is both. Ignorance of people is a factor where they don't know what is the law. People don't want to come to police for various reasons, including lack of trust on police, or because of the tribal loyalties where they don't trust whether the information which they are giving to the police will be kept secret or will be handled in the manner in which it should be handled without any officer taking sides in an investigation. So prejudice is another factor. Then over-reliance on alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, which is either the unions or the associations or the undergrounds or the village councils. That is another factor which prevents people from coming to the police. And ignorance of law is a major issue where people don't know whether what they are doing is a crime. Corruption is a typical matter in which people will say, "Oh, hame to na jane, tu logo le kam hai." For example, I was reading this interview by Commissioner of Police where he said that they have to fine, and whatever they fine, that money has to be deposited in the government treasury or something. This is not only police, like any money which a government servant imposes by way of a fine, which is authorized to do it, that money has to be deposited in the government treasury. Now, mostly our own officers don't know it also. I'm not saying police, our officers don't know it also, and the public also doesn't know it. So what happens is that a fine of 500 rupees, he charges 100 rupees and puts it in his own pocket rather than charging 500 rupees and putting it in the government deposits. This person puts the 100 rupees in his pocket. He doesn't show it to anyone. This is the oft repeated excuse in Nagaland. He may know it, but he will just simply say, "Ami to na jane, tu iniga kurvule thakche." But the ultimate loss of all this is the government and the development process. And Nagaland, as you know, is a state where most of our schemes are on a 90-10 funding basis. We go with 10% of the money to the Government of India. Government of India gives 90% of the funding to us. Which means that if today I am collecting only 500 rupees as revenue, I will only get 4,500 rupees as assistance from Government of India. But if my collection goes up to 10,000 rupees, I will get 90,000 more. So ultimately, in this whole process, the development suffers, especially in case of Nagaland, because we are dependent on what we raise. The less the amount of money that we raise into the government coffers or we show into the government coffers, the more is the loss to the ordinary person. So it is ignorance, it is alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, it is lack of trust, lack of faith. I think that tribal mindset has a lot to do with this sort of distrust among people, that if I go to a particular police station, whether my secrecy or the secrecy of my information will be maintained, whether the investigation will be partial or not. Those are major factors in Nagaland. And it is just about time that integration of tribes in Nagaland is driven formally by the government. I remember I was in many years, I was in United Nations Peacekeeping Mission in Bosnia. We had 3-4 officers from Nagaland. We were together in the same group. In Bosnia, the society was divided, and 3 major sections of the society had fought with each other. It is the Muslims, which are called the Bosniaks, the Croats. Croats were essentially Catholic Christians, and the Serbs, who were Orthodox Christians. Irrespective of the religion, they had fought with each other. And you know what was the job of the United Nations peacekeepers? Our job was to get the Bosnian police, which means these 3 components, the Muslims, the Croats, and the Serbs, to function in an integrated manner so that they don't act with prejudice with any member of the other community. Now, this is exactly, we were empowered to force it down the Bosnian police officers. We had the power to tell them this is wrong, you need to change this, otherwise you can be thrown out of the job. So Nagaland is not too different from that. So there is probably a requirement for a forced integration to be driven by the government, where in all police stations in the bigger towns like in Dimapur, Kohima, MOKOKCHUNG, the bigger towns, in the urban areas where population composition of the staff posted in a police station should be based on tribal representation, one, and we should have mechanisms to ensure that officers and the staff who are posted there, they don't discriminate against each other on the basis of religion or on the basis of tribe. See, it will help bring in a degree of Naganess into the society.
All right, sir. We really appreciate you speaking out your mind, and that's a great take for all the listeners of All India Radio MOKOKCHUNG. And listeners on the program Police and the Citizens, Empowering in Unison. We have just had a telephonic discussion with our respected Director General Border Affairs, Shri Rupin Sharma, IPS, Nagaland Police. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.